good evening, everyone. Welcome to the book club today, Sunday, 24th of July. Now, we have today Munirah Kheraluwala, who is going to make a presentation on Rabindranath Tagore. Now, that's a huge subject. Tagore is such an important figure, not only in the literature of India, but even in the history of India in terms of the social reforms that his family brought on and so on. So let's see how much of it Munirah will be able to tackle. Obviously, only a small amount. And Munirah, we're very happy to have you as a presenter today. I think you have attended a session or two, but this is your first presentation, right? So welcome.
Yes.
Now, Munirah is a writer. She is a dance and fitness instructor, and she's a clinical psychologist. So, wow. So no wonder this multifaceted girl chose this multifaceted figure to talk about. Now, today, Kaveri Narang will moderate the question answer session later on. Kaveri is a regular member. I'm sure everyone has heard her in the book club. She is from Miranda House and IIM Calcutta. She's lived the corporate life thereafter. And I just want to tell you a little something about Kaveri. She is part of a group, including some members of the book club and some others, reading the Booker International Prize winner Gitanjali Shree's novel, Tomb of Sand. And my goodness, her reading is so insightful. Her comments are so deep. So I am so impressed, Kaveri, with you. So today you'll be conducting the session. And Munirah, welcome to the stage. The mic is yours. Please take over.
And okay, guys, all the best.
Have a good time.
Have a great evening, you two.
Thank you.
Over to you. I'll be watching the recording. Yes, Munirah.
Yes. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms toward perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. These are words every Indian is familiar with and proud of. The words of Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore. A very good evening to you. I'm Munirah Kheraluwala. Thank you very much for joining me today to pay a tribute to one of India's greatest minds. A shining star in the galaxy of literary genius, Rabindranath Tagore, fondly known as Gurudev, Kabiguru, and Viswa-Bharati, was a poet, novelist, short writer, playwright, composer, philosopher, painter, and social reformer. The luminary from Bengal gave India her national anthem. Gitanjali, for which he won the Nobel Prize, placed India on the literary map of the world. Viswa-Bharati University at Santiniketan is the culmination of his vision of an ideal seat of learning. Through his rich legacy, the legend lives on. Born in the ancestral home known as Thakur Bari of the Tagore family in Jorasanko, Kolkata on the 7th of May 1861, which was the 25th day of Boishakh, at 28 minutes 37 seconds after 2 pre-dawn, Rabindranath was the 14th child of Rabindranath Tagore. His wife was Mrinalini Devi. They had 2 sons and 3 daughters. The 2 sons were Samindranath and Ratindranath. The three daughters were Atasi Lata, also known as Meera, Renuka, and Madhuri Lata. Tagore has influenced and inspired many, but who was he influenced and inspired by? Tagore's mother, Sharda Sundari Devi, initiated him into reading Bengali epics and the Puranas. The doctrine of the Upanishads remained an inspiration throughout his life and is reflected in his works. His brother Jyotirindranath, who was 12 years older than him, guided him in honing his many talents in a disciplined manner. Jyotirindranath also inspired in him a love of music. Jyoti Dada, as Rabindranath used to call him, would play the piano and Rabindranath would compose words for the music. The quest to be one with the Supreme Soul influenced Tagore's work deeply, and this is especially seen in Gitanjali. I'm not going to touch on the different genres of his work. Poems and essays. Among his most famous essays are Swadesh and Sadhana, and among the collection of poems, The Gardener and the Crescent Moon. Sadhana, or the realization of life, is a collection of essays on the philosophy of life. Some of the titles of these essays are The Relation of the Individual to the Universe, Soul Consciousness, Realization in Action, Realization in Love, The Problem of Self, The Problem of Evil, The Realization of the Infinite, The Realization of Beauty. Swadesh, as the name suggests, comprises essays on political and nationalist themes. The Gardener, the Crescent Moon, focusing on youth and childhood respectively. Tagore wrote poetry from the age of 8. His family found it difficult to accept that the youngest but the most creative member was whiling away his time writing poetry. But they did not stop him, they did not restrict any of his activities. And at 16, his collection, Bhanu Simha Thakurer Padaboli, which were Vaishnava verses, was published. Bhanu Simha was Tagore's pseudonym. Talking of poems, Gitanjali was published in 1910 in Bengali and in English in 1912. Tagore is best known for Gitanjali, or song offerings, for which he won the Nobel Prize in 1913. This honor placed India on the literary map of the world. Tagore received a cablegram one afternoon when he was taking a party to a forest near the school in Santiniketan. A man came running from the Post and Telegraphic Office to deliver it. Tagore put it in his pocket. He did not think it was of any importance. But an English visitor in the carriage urged him to open it. Apparently, the English visitor was aware of the contents of the cablegram. And Tagore's reaction was, and I opened it and read the message, which I could hardly believe. I first thought that possibly the telegraphic language was not quite correct and that I might be misreading the meaning of it. But at last, I felt certain about it. As Tagore could not visit Stockholm to receive the Nobel Prize, on 29th January 1914, Governor Carmichael handed over the Nobel medallion and certificate to him. Today, one can see it displayed at the Rabindra Bhavan Museum in Santiniketan. Tagore started the translation of Gitanjali from Bengali to English while he was looking after the family estate in Shilaidaha to attract a large readership, even though he was not confident about his command of the English language. But after the success of Gitanjali, he translated many of his works from Bengali to English. Gitanjali reflects Tagore's philosophy, a quest for complete unison with the Supreme Soul. According to him, to love everyone is to love God, and to serve mankind is to serve the Almighty. He was devastated by the deaths of his father, wife, and son Samindranath. This too was expressed in the songs of Gitanjali as a final metamorphosis from death to deathlessness. I read out a verse from Gitanjali, which is relevant to the monsoon season. In the deep shadows of the rainy July, with secret steps thou walkest, silent as night, eluding all watchers. Today, the morning has closed its eyes, heedless of the insistent calls of the loud east wind, and a thick veil has been drawn over the waking sky. The woodlands have hushed their songs, and doors are all shut at intervals. Thou art the solitary wayfarer in this deserted street. O my only friend, my best beloved, the gates are open in my house. Do not pass by like a dream. Novels. Tagore's contribution as a novelist was to shift the focus from storytelling to the psychology of the human mind. He created characters of universal appeal, tested techniques, styles, and forms of writing, and moved away from the trend of moralizing. His work had a huge impact on Bengal's literary scene, dominating it in the first quarter of the 20th century. He wrote several novels and novellas, of which the most well-known are the following: Chaturanga, the quartet; Shesher Kobita, last poem or farewell song; Nauka Dubi, the boat wreck; Ghore Baire, the home and the world; Gora, fair-skinned; Joga Jog, relationships or liaison; Chokher Bali, the eyesore; Char Adhyay, 4 chapters. And his first novel was Bau Thakuranir, or The Young Queen's Market. Short stories. Tagore introduced the short story genre to Bengali literature. Bhikarini, the beggar woman, was his first short story. This was filmed in Bengali in 1957 and in Hindi in 1961. For his stories, he found themes from the lives of folk, especially village folk. Some of his short stories are Bhikarini, the beggar woman; Kabuliwala; Monihara, or the lost jewel; Shamapti, the conclusion; Postmaster; Joy Parajoy, victory and defeat; Shampadok, editor; Otithi, the guest; Oporichit, the unknown; Mukut, or crown. Kabuliwala was a short story written in 1892 and one of his most popular short stories, which was filmed in both Bengali and Hindi. I read out a summary of Kabuliwala. Narrated by 5-year-old Minnie's father, Kabuliwala is a touching story of friendship and father-daughter relations. Rahmat is an Afghan dry fruit seller and money lender who comes to Calcutta to do business. Minnie gets acquainted with him by calling him to her house one day when he is doing the rounds in her locality. And though initially she is scared of him, they soon strike up a beautiful friendship. Rahmat gives her generous helpings of dry fruit for free, and she regales him with her childish tales. Though Rahmat is looked at with suspicion by Minnie's mother, her father allows the friendship. But one day, Rahmat gets arrested after he stabs a man for non-payment and is imprisoned for several years. On his release, he visits Minnie, but it is her wedding day, and Minnie's father is reluctant to let him meet her at first. Rehmat leaves some dry fruit for Minnie and shows a scrap of old paper with a tiny handprint of his daughter to Minnie's father. This was a handprint he had taken before leaving Kabul, and he always keeps this scrap of paper close to his heart. This melts the latter's heart, and he summons Minnie. Minnie enters dressed as a bride, which makes Rehmat realize that his own daughter must be grown up too. And Minnie does not recognize the Kabuliwala. Her father tries to remind her, but she still does not remember. The story ends with Minnie's father cutting back on some of the wedding expenses to be able to gift the money for Rehmat's journey to Kabul to reunite with his daughter. And the very first time the Kabuliwala sees Minnie, he sees his daughter in her because she's about the same age. The message the author has tried to give here is that people across borders have the same emotions. We are all human. We should learn to empathize with other situations and feelings and be kind. There are two main themes in Kabuliwala. One, the friendship between Minnie and the Kabuliwala. Age is not a criterion. Age is not a factor, and it's a very affectionate bond. The other is father-daughter relations. One between the narrator and his daughter Minnie, and the other between the Kabuliwala, Rehmat, and his daughter, who is about the same age as Minnie. The only film directed by Rabindranath Tagore was Natir Pujo, or Dancing Girls Worship, or even Courtesan Girls Worship, in 1932. These stories were adapted as films, both Bengali and Hindi, some of the most famous being Kabuliwala, Chokher Bali, and Ghore Baire. Drama. You see a very young Rabindranath Tagore here playing the role of Valmiki. Tagore focused on the musical, lyrical appeal of drama. Some of his most famous plays were Valmiki Pratibha, The Genius of Valmiki, Kal Mrigaya, The Fateful Hunt, Mayar Khela, The Play of Maya, Rokto Korobi, Red Oleanders, Muktodhara, The Waterfall, Chitra, which is about a princess, Raja, the king of the dark chamber. Of Valmiki Pratibha and Kal Mrigaya, Tagore says, the enthusiasm which went to the making of Valmiki Pratibha and Kal Mrigaya, I have never felt for any other work of mine. In these two, the creative musical impulse of the time found expression. His dance dramas were extremely popular. Among his most famous dance dramas are Chitrangada, Chandalika, and Shama. Memoirs. Tagore has written many books about his life. My Life in My Words, Life and Times of Rabindranath Tagore, and more. I quote from two of his memoirs, Jibonspriti and Kelebala. Jibonspriti, or My Reminiscences, was published in 1911, in which he writes about the first 27 years of his life. Kelebala, or My Boyhood Days, was published in 1940. He writes about his childhood days in Calcutta. I quote from My Reminiscences. Tagore used to love imagining and fantasizing. He saw mystery and wonder in the simplest of things. Quoting Tagore, looking back on childhood days, the thing that recurs most often is the mystery which used to fill both life and the world. Something undreamt of was lurking everywhere, and the uppermost question was, when would we come across it? It was as if nature held something in her closed hands and was smilingly asking us, what do you think I have? Though Tagore was from an aristocratic family, They were no longer very rich. In my reminiscences, he talks about how in those days they valued the smallest of things. He also alluded to children's tendency to take things for granted in modern times. He says, nothing ever came so easily to us. Many a trivial thing was, for us, a rarity, and we lived mostly in the hope of attaining, when we were old enough, the things which the distant future held in trust for us. The result was that what little we did get, we enjoyed to the utmost. From skin to core, nothing was thrown away. The modern child of a well-to-do family nibbles at only half the things he gets. The greater part of his world is wasted on him. Tagore also talks about the importance of rhyme in poetry. He says, I realize why rhyme is so needful in poetry. Because of it, the words come to an end, and yet end not. The utterance is over, but not its ring. And the ear and the mind can go on and on with their game of tossing the rhyme to each other. I now from the bottom. Tagore hated being in the confines of a classroom. He did not like going to school. School was like prison to him. In those days, girls were not sent to school, which made him wish he was a girl. Quoting Tagore, the lady of the neighboring house in the lane is drying her hair on the roof, and her two little girls are playing with shells. They have plenty of leisure, for in those days, girls were not obliged to go to school. And I used to think how fine it would have been to be born a girl. But as it is, the old horse draws me in the rickety carriage to my Andamans, in which from 10 to 4 I am doomed to exile. So to bunk school, to avoid going to his Andamans, this is what he used to do. My constitution was so abominably sound that even when the most urgent need arose for avoiding school, I could never make myself ill by fair means or foul. I would get wet through shoes, stockings and all, but I could not catch cold. I would lie on the open roof in the heavy autumn dew. My hair and clothes would be soaked, but I never had the suspicion of a cough. Tagore talks only of his brother Rabindranath and his special talent for music. Jyoti Dada, who was 12 years older than Rabindranath, was a big influence in developing the latter's musical talent. He says about his brother, Jyoti Dada's hands would stray about the piano as he composed and rattled off tunes in various new styles. And he would keep me by his side as he did so. It was my work to fix the tunes, which he composed so rapidly by setting words to them then and there. Also, he says of his brother that he would draw the bow across his violin and I would sing in my clear treble voice. Awards and honors. He won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1913 for Gitanjali. He was knighted in 1915, but he gave up the title in protest of the Jallianwala Bagh incident in 1919. On 7th August 1940, he was awarded a doctorate by Oxford University. Viswa-Bharati University. I read out some excerpts from Tagore's Nobel Prize acceptance speech. And from here we get to know what led to the formation of a school which grew and developed into a university. I was an obscure individual to most of my countrymen in those days. I was quite content with that obscurity, which protected me from the curiosity of the crowds. And then came a time when my heart felt a longing to come out of that solitude and to do some work for my fellow beings, and not only give shape to my dreams and meditate deeply on the problems of life, but try to give expression to my ideas through some definite work, some definitive service for my fellow beings. And the one work which came to my mind was to teach children. Tagore's vision for Viswa-Bharati was world in one nest. This is what he had to say. Viswa-Bharati represents India where she has her wealth of mind, which is for all. Viswa-Bharati acknowledges India's obligation to offer to the others the hospitality of her best culture and India's right to accept from others their best. Today, Viswa-Bharati is a famous university. Tagore believed that learning should be a part of life's natural growth. And to achieve this, the first step should be to instill in a child oneness with nature and the environment. At his school, Brahmachari Ashram, now known as Path Bhavan, which he started in 1901 with 5 students and 5 teachers, students were taught the trees. He was following the Gurukul system. Even today, the first rain of the season is celebrated by the students by enjoying a barefoot outing so umbrellas. Tree planting or Briksha Ropon Utsav is a ceremonious event during which saplings are brought in beautifully decorated palanquins by the students and teachers together, all singing and dancing joyously. Tagore's school was modeled on the lines of the Gurukul system. The school grew and eventually became a university. A significant spot in this ashram heritage complex is Chatin Tola, named after the 2 ancient chatin trees that stood here. Tagore's father is said to have meditated here and had a spiritual realization. Rabindranath too used to sit under the trees at sunset. Chatin Tola is considered the starting point of Santiniketan. In this picture here, you see Chatin Tola. The trees, of course, are no longer there, but this is a heritage spot. While we're still talking of learning, in my reminiscences, Tagore talks about the learning process. He says, if the whole mind does not work from the beginning, it's undeveloped to the end. Learning should, as far as possible, follow the process of eating. When the taste begins from the first bite, the stomach is awakened to its function before it is loaded so that its digestive juices get full play. Likewise, about teaching, Tagore says, the main object of teaching is not to explain meanings, but to knock at the door of the mind. Rabindranath Bhavan Museum and Uttarayan Complex. This is the Rabindranath Bhavan Museum building you see here. The Rabindranath Bhavan Museum is a must-see for any visitor to Santiniketan. Among the intriguing exhibits are the citation of the Nobel Prize, some of Tagore's original manuscripts, letters, documents, paintings and painting tools, photographs, and gifts he received from people and countries. Close by, the Uttarayan complex houses 5 buildings: Konarak, Udayan, Shamoli, Unoshcho, and Udichi. Tagore would follow his heart to decide which one he wanted to stay in and for how long. This is one of the houses. These are 2 more. The other 2 I could not take photographs of because the buildings were under restoration. And this is Rabindranath Tagore's car on display in the same complex. Rabindra Sangeet. With over 2,000 songs to his credit, a talk on Tagore, a prolific composer, is not complete without a mention of his Rabindra Sangeet or Tagore song. The songs are emotive and range from devotional to quasi-erotic compositions. Everyone in Bengal, whether Bengali or non-Bengali, is familiar with Rabindra Sangeet. One simply cannot escape the allure of Tagore songs. Anthems and patriotic songs. Rabindranath Tagore wrote and composed both Jana Gana Mana and Amar Sonar Bangla, the national anthems of India and Bangladesh respectively. Jana Gana Mana was written in Shadhu Bhasha, a form of Sanskrit Bengali. It was first sung in 1911 at a Calcutta session of the Indian National Congress, and in 1950 adopted by the Constitutional Assembly of the Republic of India as the national anthem. Akla Cholo Re is a protest song Tagore wrote during the Swadeshi period of the freedom movement. Gandhiji loved the song and was deeply influenced by it. Along with Amar Sonar Bangla, Akla Cholo Re became a key song for the anti-partition movement in the Bengal presidency in 1905. I'll end this presentation by playing Akla Cholo Re in the voice of Amitabh Bachchan. The words of the song are, Jodi tor dak shune keo na ashe, tobe akla cholo re, which translates to, if no one responds to your call, if no one supports you, walk alone, continue your journey.
যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে তবে একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো রে তবে একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো রে যদি কেউ কথা না কয় ওরে ও ভাগা কেউ কথা না কয় যদি সবাই থাকে মুখ ফিরায় সবাই করে ভয় যদি সবাই থাকে মুখ ফিরায় সবাই করে ভয় তবে পরাণ খুলে তবে পরাণ খুলে তুই মুখ ফুটে তোর মনের কথা একলা বলো রে ও মতোই মুখ ফুটে তোর মনের কথা একলা বলো রে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে
Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Excellent. Thank you, Munirah. Thank you very much indeed. You have covered the wide range of Tagore's talent, his interests, and the enormous contributions that he made to the literary world. There was one little aspect of his which came much later in his life, which was his art. Did you have any occasion to, as a painter?
Yes, in fact, Tagore has more than 3,000 paintings to his credit. And many of these are his cover pages. And you see a lot of it displayed at the Rabindranath Museum in Santiniketan. But Tagore himself was not very happy with his paintings. He was not very proud of his paintings. And in fact, he has written in a letter to one of the celebrities of those times that I don't think I'm cut out for painting. And the reason was that he was colorblind. He was red-green colorblind. So he did not know how the work was coming out, which is why he did not want to promote his paintings too much. And yet he exhibited some of his work in Paris and many of the French cities because he was highly influenced by the French artists and also in other cities of the world, but mainly in France.
Yes, it's very interesting that his career as a painter, his interest in art started very late. I think when he was about 64 or 65, when he always used to make these doodles on his, when he wrote any poem or script, if there was any error, he would like to, when he erased it, he didn't like it showing up as an erasure. And so he would make a little doodle. And that's how through these doodles, he started his art. And he was self-taught, as you said. Yes, he was absolutely self-taught. His art was very surrealistic in its conception. And he eventually painted many more pieces than he composed songs. So that was another phase of his life. Munirah, any kind of views you have on his political consciousness, on his political views?
No, I've been reading his essays from Swadesh, just a few, and no, not really. He was very, very patriotic, and of course you see them in his songs, and he was very strong about his opinions.
Yes.
And he had the Gandhiji visiting him, in fact, towards the end of his life. And
yes.
He was, yes, and that is when he heard the song, and he was very deeply influenced by Ekla Cholo Re.
Yeah. Tagore, at the time of the partition of Bengal, which took place in 1905, that's when Tagore, I think, really got interested in, got drawn into the world of politics. He was a patriot, first and last, but he was very troubled by the concept of nationalism. As opposed to, say, nationhood. Nationalism was something which disturbed him. And he thought that there was a very fine line between nationalism and xenophobia. And that was one of the things that he had differences with Gandhiji on, between him. Though they were lifelong friends, they had great respect for each other. But this was one thing where he withdrew from any active political involvement because he was concerned that the Swadeshi movement and other aspects were moving towards, the fracture between Hindus and Muslims, too much, communal caste issues, things like that, which disturbed him. And so therefore, though Gandhiji remained a very close associate, there were strong differences between the two of them.
and almost till the end, because Gandhiji visited him in Santiniketan when Rabindranath Tagore was 79 and he passed away at the age of 80.
Yeah.
And in fact, when Gandhiji, it's a very interesting incident, some of the ashram dwellers, some of the followers of Tagore approached Gandhiji with a request, and Gandhiji asked, what can I do for you? They said, please talk to Tagore to go to sleep in the afternoon after lunch. And he doesn't listen to us, but he has so much respect for you. He will certainly listen to you. So Gandhiji had his lunch. He had a short nap, and then he went to Tagore's room, and Tagore was surprised to see him. And he says, are you not comfortable in your room? So Gandhiji said, no, I'm very comfortable, but I have come to ask to request you to please take some rest after your lunch. To which Tagore replied that with great respect to you, but I have taken a vow at the age of 12, and for 67 years I have maintained this vow that I will not take any rest during the day, and I will use every minute of my time to work. It was a very interesting incident which was there in one of his books.
Thank you. And Munirah, he came from a very
Illustrious family.
evolved and illustrious family,
Yes.
and they were from the Brahmo Samaj, which
Yes.
which actually promoted the empowerment of women. Anything specific you would like to talk about in terms of in Tagore's works, the his conception of what women should be be allowed to accomplish?
Yes, he was always an advocate of liberalism and education, and in fact, his own sisters, his elder sister Saudamini, she was an author. She was a poet, and the other sister, Swarna Kumari Devi, was the first woman novelist of Bengal. She was a writer and editor as well. And yes, Tagore was always trying to promote women's education. And this was seen, and he had many women followers in his ashram as well, in Santiniketan.
Yes, there's a famous novel that he wrote, I think it was in 1914, called, it was a short story. I shouldn't call it a novel. It was a short story. Called Sri Patru, which is a woman's letter from a woman. It was actually a wife who decides to leave her marriage, and where she explains in this letter she writes to her husband that perhaps she was too intelligent to pass her life unheard, unseen, ignored, and that she could no longer deny her own need for agency, for self-development, for recognition. And it was in her love for a young girl who had been, I think, ill-treated, that she took her and she went away from her home and wrote this letter. And this was in 1914, which was a...
Yes, he was well ahead of his times.
Yes, it was an absolutely astounding kind of thing, recognition of a woman's inherent right as an individual and not as an appendage of another person.
Exactly.
So that was, and this was something which was reflected in various. His Chandalika, the Chandalika dance drama.
Yes.
Where Chandalika tells Arjun, it's of course based on the Mahabharata, the incident in the Mahabharata, where he says, of course, again, that she says she does not want to be put on a pedestal. She wants to be treated as an equal. And apparently Jawaharlal Nehru put it those words when his wife Kamla was on her deathbed, that I should have realized that Kamla wanted an equal participation in my life. So he was very much a person who embodied the liberated human being in every respect.
Exactly. And recently there was this movie on Tagore, Thinking of Him. It's a film about Rabindranath and his friendship with an Argentine writer, Victoria. And there were talks about what the friendship was about. And he always insisted that it was just a very good understanding. And, it's like a man and a woman can be good friends intellectually. It was an intellectual relationship.
It was perhaps a romantic relationship, but it was not, as we understand today, it was not an affair. And actually, Victoria Ocampo is the one who stimulated his interest in art because she noticed his squiggles.
Yes.
And it was a chance meeting because he was on his way to Peru. He had stopped at Buenos Aires, he got ill, and Victoria Ocampo had heard about him. She had read a translation by André Gide,
Yes.
the French philosopher who translated Gitanjali, and she came to meet him, and that started really a relationship between them, which was at the level of intellect. It is recognized now, he found her a companion very late in his life. His wife had been dead for 40 years. She was the one who stimulated his interest in art, and because she noticed his doodles. And she was the one who arranged for his very first exhibition in Paris. She happened to be in Paris at that time.
Yes.
So that was a late.
And both inspired each other. Yeah,
Right,
both inspired each other, yes.
Right.
And even Kadambari Devi, Jyoti's, his
Wife.
Rabindranath's wife, she
Who
was
was
also a
his
very
muse, absolutely.
big influence in his life and motivating him.
Right. Would anybody like to ask any questions?
Would Baruchas ji, आप बात करना चाहेंगे?
Yeah, I'd be very happy to today.
Yeah.
Very often Farooq asks me to comment about some things that I don't know anything about. But today is very different and it's very, very emotional for me. I am sort of direct beneficiary of Gurudev's thinking. And it has been a very, very personal impact on my life. And this is because my grand aunt, Kumi Vakil, lived at Santiniketan in Tagore's time for many, many years. She taught tribal art there. And I was brought up by her. She was very, very close to me. As a very small boy, I was a very hyperactive boy. And she would take me in Panchgani, make me sit watching the sunset. And that is how my love for nature actually grew up. And today it's very much a part of my life. Half my life has been working with environment and nature. But I want to tell you something else. I want to tell you how Kumi auntie taught me things at that very young age. And of course, she was there in my life till I went to medical college. And how it has influenced my own thinking on environment education. And how at Bharati Vidyapeeth Environment Institute, where I'm the director, I have used all those things that Kumi auntie taught me, which she got from Gurudev. And just to give you a few examples, it's how she taught me how to observe nature. And I today use that for hundreds of children, including school kids as well as postgraduate students. This thinking about how to use nature-based festivals is something that we do at Bharati Vidyapeeth. How do you turn on children? Environment education per se sometimes is not just, it's really a turn off. And what really works is taking children out into nature. And today we don't teach them taxonomy as such. We talk about the processes of nature. This was again something that Kumi auntie, who used to say, "Ame toba metric pass bhi nathi." But this is what she taught me in those days. So going beyond species and doing that act of tree plantation with a certain deeper meaning is what turns children on. Telling stories of nature turns children on. And most importantly, we believe that all the teaching that we do at Bharati Vidyapeeth, including at the MSc exam, have to be go out into nature. And that is what education on environment is really about. So these are the 6 things that I got from my grand aunt, which were directly from influences of Gurudev. And if you read the National Education Policy of 2020, you'll find these things today getting reflected in the National Education Policy. which Gurudev talked about so many years ago. So thank you very much for really inviting me to say something today, Farooq.
Yeah.
Gurudev has been a huge influence on my life through my aunt. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Eraj. Would anybody else like to add something? Kaveri?
No, I think Munirah has done a great job of, that it's the range of contributions that Tagore made.
I think Mukul wants to say something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I want to ask Munirah about this story Kabuliwala, which was, you explained in a little detail, and I have different takes on it. I mean, a different opinion from what would probably be what we are taught to see it as. What did you think? I mean, given the fact that you've done so much work on Tagore, how would you interpret that story? What do you feel about it?
Well, I feel he's tried to give this message that everyone has the same emotions. Across borders, we are all human, and we should show compassion, kindness, and help if we can. And the two themes were the touching father-daughter relations and the friendship. The friendship, age is not the criterion. You can form a friendship or an affectionate bond with anybody.
Yeah. But do you think that it would be, appreciated by young people today or people today? I mean, you think it would be, or do you feel it's too straightforward? Or
well, to start with, actually, young people unfortunately don't read today.
Yeah.
But if at all they read, I think this is a story which is charming and will stay charming to every generation. So I think, yes, it would appeal in spite of the simplicity, but then there is so much to the story.
Okay.
It has an emotional appeal. It's very moving. It's touching. It's especially the end. It's very, very touching. And that is something which I think even the young people of today would be moved by.
Incidentally, in the Bengali version of Kabuliwala, Sharmila Tagore's younger sister was the one who acted as the little girl.
Yes.
And right at the end, when Kabuliwala comes back and that little girl is ready to get married, there's a brief thing where Sharmila Tagore comes on, very briefly. But otherwise, it was her younger sister who did it, who played the role of Minnie, the little girl.
Yeah.
Can I just say a word?
Latika ji?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I'm extremely touched by what Dr. Bharucha had to say, which means we have amongst our group at least one person who has been directly influenced or slightly indirectly through his Aunt Kumi by what she learned of Tagore's view of the world, and he has taken it forward. So I find it extremely touching that we have someone like that in our midst. Thank you, Dr. Bharucha, for telling us this. Thank you. I just want to say that the little that I read of Tagore, I must admit that I've not read a lot. Yes, I've read Gitanjali, but I have Char Adhyay I've read. And that's also a very lovely movie by Kumar Shahani. I find that he's one of those writers in whose writing, whatever the writing, whether it's short story or novel or poetry that I've read, is an extraordinary sense of heightened dignity. I find him an extremely dignified mind and a dignified writer. I don't know if anyone will agree with what I say, but from the little that I know, and I'm not a scholar, I don't know enough about him, there is a lot of dignity in his writing as there is in his personality.
I wanted to add something, Kaveri. Recently, I had a chance to go to Shillong, and I was staying in a hotel called Tripura Castle, which was owned by the Prince of Tripura. And in my room, there was a desk of, where this Tagore ji was writing, and I have some photos of it, which I wanted to just share with people. So in my room, I had this desk on which I just downloaded. So can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how do I download it. So let me make it big. So this was the desk on which Rabindranath Tagore had written his, this is a photo of him with the Tripura king at that time, who also took part in the, when the Noakhali riots took place, the king of Tripura played a major role in quietening down the riots. And this is Rabindranath Tagore, and sorry, you have to see me sitting on the desk.
Oh, wow. What an honor for you to be.
Wow.
Just to show that, I was there on the desk, and, the writing desk was used by Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore. He was under the patronage of the Maharajas of Tripura, and his works, Mukut and Rajarshi, were based on the Manikya dynasty. So he was being given a lot of patronage by the Maharajas of Tripura. This is one aspect probably many people would not know, and this is what I wanted to touch. Another thing that I wanted to tell was that during the early years of Jnanadav, when we had the physical space, we had a gentleman who had, he was a photographer who photographed, he was a photographer. When he came to Jnanadav, he was nearly, you can say, 93 years old, about 5 years back, and he was a photographer who photographed Rabindranath Tagore. Last photo, which is there in the internet, when he sits in the car to go for his last treatment to Delhi when he was very sick. If you see the last image, this is the photo that he had taken, and the actual photo, this is the photo him sitting in the car, in the car backside before he was going to Delhi to the airport, and this photo was taken by a gentleman who visited Jnanadav.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, and this photo he gifted us. He made a big portrait and he gifted us.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, and during the Jnanadav days, every May, I think May 8th was his day or something, the whole Bengali people used to land up in Jnanadav with their dresses, and they used to sing and dance, and it used to be a Rabindranath Tagore evening for us in Jnanadav. I don't know whether some of you remember it, but that was about 4 or 5 years back when we used to do that every year, one evening for in Ghana. So those were the things I wanted to just share.
Well, there's one last small thing about Tagore. Though he's known so much for his literary contributions, his artistic temperament, he was also interested in science. Apparently, the very first little story that he wrote was on life on other planets. He was 12 years old. And even later on, he published something which is called Viswa-Bharati, which is about science. And there was some interesting dialogues between Tagore and Einstein. The first of these, I think, took place when Tagore visited Einstein in his place outside Berlin, I think, where he had a house. And there was, again, a difference, as with Gandhiji, who he respected a lot, but there was a difference in opinion between Tagore and Einstein's conception of the world. There was a difference. Einstein apparently said basically there are two conceptions of the world. One where where unity with the human existence as the central to the world is one view, and the other is where the world has an objective reality independent of any human intervention. And of course, Tagore was talking about the former, where to him, the world, nature, and which is part of our Eastern concept of Hindu, part of the philosophy of Hinduism, where, the world around us, they're manifestations of a reality. And Einstein said that they're two independent things. And he apparently asked Tagore, would the statue of Apollo at Belvedere be considered equally beautiful, whether there was a person there or not? And Tagore supposedly said, it could not be beautiful unless there was a human being who was made by a human being. And Einstein said, okay, I concede that, but beauty, but not truth. Truth is independent. So there was a very interesting series of dialogue, and he met Einstein more than once. So there was also an interest in science, and he eventually wrote Viswa-Bharati, which is on science.
Actually, one of the important things he disagreed with Gandhiji was on the charkha. So if you go on YouTube, there are many videos where, you know, Tagore has been vociferously criticizing Gandhi in very strong language. What nonsense this charkha is. I mean, I'm just telling you, I don't agree with it. I think charkha was a very good symbolism for self-reliance and Swadesh, but he totally disagreed and he felt that Gandhiji is distracting the nation or something like that. So these are one very aspect which I remember, his total anger on Gandhiji's concept of the charkha. Anyway, if anybody more has to add.
No, as far as the charkha is concerned, and it's just a thought that occurred to me. It's probably one act, gesture, activity, whichever you wish to call it, which is not associated with caste. Is that correct? Yeah,
I think so. Gandhi chose that as to be like Jnanatak, don't influence in activism. No, this. So he probably thought as a very, very unique idea of Gandhiji. But Tagore disagreed with him a lot. I mean, it's there on YouTube. You can search it out.
You look it up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's also the kind of activity which, being repetitive, also allows you to meditate.
Yeah, it meditates. Yeah, that's right. But those are all the things that we understand. But Tagore Saab ka khud ka opinion tha.
You know, talking about the charkha recently, that the anniversary of the formation of the flag, which was in July, the Indian flag, and at one stage it was considered that in the center of the flag you would have a charkha. And eventually it was decided not to have the charkha and to have the
Chakra.
Ashoka Chakra. So the charkha was going to be put over there, but it was felt that on both sides, on one side you can see the charkha, and the back does not look appropriate. And so the charkha was abandoned and the Ashoka Chakra was put in.
Now the Ashoka Chakra is become controversial because of the way people are interpreting it, the new one.
The lions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kaveri, then we can make some closing remarks for Munirah, and maybe you can end the program. Kaveri?
Thank you so much, Munirah. You've done a lot of research in in the presentation that you made today, and you took care to give us the visuals to supplement what you were saying. It's difficult to cover the essence of a person who has such a wide-ranging, talent and contribution that has been made. And I think you did a great job of highlighting those various areas in which he made such a mark in our country, in the history of our nation, in our literary sensibilities, in putting us on the map of the world with the Nobel Prize. In so many ways, you have covered it beautifully. And I think your visit to Santiniketan and the pictures that you took, it was a wonderful personal contribution to this wonderful man. Thank you so very much for your presentation here today.
Thank you very much.
And for covering all the aspects of this amazing human being. We are privileged that we had a person like this in our country. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. So before we end, I'll just inform all of you that the recording of this program will be on the Facebook, and I'll be putting the link in all the invitation groups that we have. And I think so, Kaveri, next week on the 7th of August, we have Sunita Shetty, who will be presenting the Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak. Yeah. And
that will be something to look forward to. Good.
Yeah. 21st August, Mohini Khoth will be presenting Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. And in September, we have 4th September, Prabhanjan Mane, who will be presenting Top Dog, Underdog by Susan Laurie Parks. And 18th September will be Shanti Menon, Homeland Elegies by Ayad Akhtar. Then, of course, October, Latika will be presenting 1984 by George Orwell. So, taught in school to us. 16th October, Prashant Sinha, The Red and the Black by Stendhal. This is the programs that are in the pipeline.
May I just add one last thing?
Yeah.
My friend, who's a poet, and who has a website called Poetry at Sangam, Priya Chhabria. She lives in Pune, and her latest book is called Sing of Life, and it's revisioning Tagore's Gitanjali. So she has taken inspiration from Gitanjali and written poetry. Sing of Life.
Okay.
Not Song of Life, Sing of Life.
Excellent, excellent, Latika ji. So Kaveri and Munirah, thank you very much for today's program. And if your permission, can I close the program with all of you?
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Farooq. Thank you, Munirah.
Thank you very much.
And Dr. Bharucha, particularly.
Bharucha साहब ने हिला दी अपने को.
Yeah.